You're listening to a presentation of The Rising. We're a real church for real people where you can belong before you believe. We're always honored to hear how God is working in your life through this ministry. If you have a story you'd like to share with us, hit us up at wearetherising.com or on Facebook or Instagram. Finally, if you'd like to invest in what God's doing through this church, you can always give online through our site. Thanks again for tuning in, and get ready. Lean forward with an expectant attitude to hear a message from God's Word.
Happy New Year, happy decade. It's a brand new decade. 2020, come on somebody. 2020 is going to be my year. 2020, I'm going to get out of debt. 2020, I'm going to get organized. 2020, I'm going to get fit. 2020, everything's going to be different. Maybe, if you change some stuff. Come on somebody. 2020 will be your year if you develop some discipline that you didn't have in 2019. 2020 can be your year if you set up some systems that were missing in 2019. It'll be your year if you get some people involved in your life, some friends to hold you accountable for the change that you want to make in 2020. Come on, somebody. See, don't be disillusioned into thinking that just because the date changed, you're going to change. If you want to change, you got to work it. You got to do some things different. And hey, you picked a great way to start the year by being here on the first Sunday of the year in church. You're in the right place at the right time. And here's what we're going to do this year. If you'll allow me, I'll take you on a journey to help you become the person God has called you to be. But we got to go on that journey together. And listen, my hope is that, hey, this is the first Sunday of the year. And I love it that you're here. But listen, don't let this be like the gym. Come on, because you know the gym is packed in January and people fade in February. So let this be the year that you say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. We're going to not just go to church, we're going to be involved in church. Come on, did I lose my church over the year? Did I lose some people? So listen, I'll just let you know if you're here for the first time, and if you've been coming for a while, I just want to remind you that I preach better when you respond, okay? If the sermon sucks, it's your fault. So you got to respond and laugh at my jokes and respond when you hear something good. But I'm excited about this year, and I really do believe that it's going to be a game changer for you if you'll press in and you'll do some things differently. And listen, we're starting a brand new series today called Instamacy, and it's all about how to have real friendships in an Instagram world. See, the average person has 338 friends on Facebook, 150 followers on Instagram. See, we live in a society and a culture where we are more connected now than ever before. We live in a society and culture where I can look and see what's happening with my friend in Alaska, while at the same time seeing what's happening with the state of the world and politics. And at that same time, I can find out what you're having for dinner, and I can read an inspirational quote that's been copied and pasted on a picture of a flowery field, all while watching a video of a cat trying to escape a saran wrap maze. See, I can do all of that all at once. But here's the thing. 8 seconds later, all of that's old news. Right? Because we live in a culture where we're constantly connected and there's consistent content coming our way. And so we got to keep up. We live in a culture and a society where we're more connected than ever. But I would also say that we live in a culture and a society where we are more disconnected than ever before. Because my friendship is at a distance. Because my relationships with so many people that I know happen through the internet. We live in a society where we're more connected than ever, but we're also more isolated than ever. And I would argue, and studies would argue, that the reason for that is because the technology that we possess that connects us also disconnects us. Because studies show that reports of depression and anxiety and stress and loneliness are on the rise. How are we more depressed than ever, more lonely than ever, more stressed than ever, more anxious than ever, when we're so connected? It's time to retreat from Instamacy and live in intimacy. So this is my hope over the next 4 weeks, including today, is I want to take us on a journey, if you'll allow me to. I want to take us on a countercultural journey where we escape Instamacy and have intimacy. Now, when I think about intimacy, I just want to clear this up. When I think about intimacy, I often think about a husband and a wife and things they do. That's not just intimacy. That's part of it. But intimacy is the act of knowing and being known. And I think this is what each and every one of us want. We all desire this. We want to know other people in a deep way, and we want to be known in a deep way. And so as we go on this journey to discover how to have real friendships in an Instagram world, we need to start by laying the foundation with the technology that we have a relationship with. So I want to give you the title for my sermon. If you would take a moment to write it down on your note card, or maybe you could type it in your phone if that's where you're taking notes, because you are taking notes, right? Come on, somebody. Because I know you think you're going to remember this. You're not. When you take notes, then 6 months later, when you're going through some stuff, you can go back to those notes and say, oh, yeah, that was really great. And you can apply it then. So everybody's taking notes. Here's the title for my sermon, if you would take a moment to write it down. I worked hard on this sermon, worked hard on this title, so help me out by writing it down. Here it is. My relationship with the thing in my pocket. The title for my sermon today is My Relationship with the Thing in My Pocket. If you're a lady, you might say it this way: my relationship with the thing in my purse. Right? My relationship with the thing in my pocket. Now, if we're gonna escape Instamacy and have real intimacy and have great friendships, here's what I need to do. We need to talk about technology here and now, and then I want to point you to this ancient book that was written 3,500 years ago, and we're gonna figure out what that has to say about our technology today. So, in the 80s, the cell phone was invented. And not a lot of people had cell phones. Some people had pagers, beepers, right? And here's what a beeper was. A beeper was this rectangular device that you would clip on your belt or like on your pants. And here's the thing. Back in the 80s and 90s, if you wanted to call somebody, you had to use what was called a landline phone, right? This is a phone that's connected to the wall, right? So what you would do is you would pick the phone up off of the hook of the receiver, and you'd push actual buttons to dial someone's number. Or if it was real old school, you went to your grandma's house, you'd put your finger in a slot that was on a circle. It was a rotary phone, and then you'd move it. And each time you'd put your finger in a new slot for that number. That's how you called somebody, right? And so you'd talk to somebody on this phone that was connected to the wall. And when you called them, the only way you could talk to them is if they were by a phone that was connected to the wall. And so they would pick it up, and that's how you would talk. But then came the beeper. And if they weren't by their phone that was connected to the wall, you could page them, you could beep them saying, hey, give me a call. So they would get that, they'd go to their phone that was connected to the wall, and they'd call you, and hopefully you were there. Like, this is how people talk to each other at a distance back in the 80s and 90s. I just want to take a moment to say how life was in the 80s and 90s. It's so bizarre. It's crazy. Like, I was born in 1983, and so I grew up mostly in the 90s. But in the 80s and 90s, like, if you wanted to listen to music, right, like, that you controlled. I mean, you could listen to it on the radio, but if you wanted to listen to music that you controlled, here's what you had to do. You had to get in your car or on your bike and go to the local music shop, right? And then you'd walk into this music shop, and some of them were cool. Some of them had listening stations set up with like Discmans and Walkmans, and you could go in there, and some of you are like, what is that? Google it. But you could walk in, and they had rows and rows of cassette tapes. I hadn't even got to CDs yet, right? Now, some of you are like, I could take it further back to 8 tracks. I didn't grow up then. I'm talking about 80s and 90s. But you go in, and there's rows and rows of cassette tapes, right? And you would go, and you would peruse through these cassette tapes, and then you could listen to it before you bought it. If you liked it, you could buy it. And then you would take that cassette tape or that CD. You'd go to a desk where there was an actual person there. You'd interact with that person. And watch this. In the 80s and 90s, people actually paid for music, right? Like, you would buy the album, and then you'd take it home, you put it in your Walkman or your boombox, and you'd listen to the whole album. That's how music listening was back in the day. Like, you couldn't listen to this song and that song and that song because it took too long to rewind and fast forward, right? So you listen to a whole album, and this is how we listen to music. And then if you wanted to watch a movie in the 80s or 90s, and it wasn't at the theater, but you wanted to watch a movie at your house, here's what you did. You piled the family in the car on a Friday night, and you drove to your local Blockbuster, right? You'd go to Blockbuster, and there would be these rows and stacks and aisles and shelves filled with VHS tapes. Hadn't even got to DVDs yet. Filled with VHS tapes. And then when you went to Blockbuster, you had to you had to have 2 or 3 options of movies that you wanted to watch, because you'd find the one that you wanted to watch, but if there weren't, and it would be in the case, but there had to be VHS tapes behind it for you to grab and rent if there weren't them and the people got there before you did and you were out of luck. So you had to go to your second choice or your third choice. But you would grab your movie. Then you'd take it to the counter where there was an actual person there. You'd interact with them, rent your movie, and bring it back like a week later, but you had to make sure you rewound it, right? Because how many of you remember the phrase, be kind? Yeah, exactly. You didn't want to be the jerk who didn't rewind. And then they started charging people for not rewinding it. So this was how it was, man. If you wanted to watch movies in the 80s and 90s, this is how you did it. Like, in the 80s and 90s, if you were meeting up with, watch this. In the 80s and 90s, people actually got in their car and drove places without a phone in their pocket. Right? Like, they drove places without a phone in their pocket. Like, and here's the thing. In the 80s and 90s, if you were meeting with somebody, like, you just met with them. Like, there was no, I'll be there in 3-minute text. You know, like, why do we do that? You just showed up 3 minutes late. And the person waited, and they were like, hey, how are you? Good to see you. Like, that was it. There was no, hey, I'm on my way, when really you're, like, getting ready still at the house, right? like you couldn't text that to people. You just showed up and met people. In the 80s and 90s, if you were waiting somewhere, like, you waited, right? Like, you were standing in line, and do you know what you looked at when you were standing in line? You looked at the back of the person's head in front of you. Like, that was it. Or you talked to the people who were there. I mean, this is how it was then. Back then, if you went to the doctor's office, the dentist's office, whatever, do you know what you looked at? A highlights magazine, right? Right? With you looked at whatever magazines they had or whatever book that you brought, like you read when you waited. And if you were making popcorn in your house in the 80s and 90s, do you know what you looked at? The microwave. Like, you just stared at the microwave and waited for that 3 minutes to end. Like, in the 80s and 90s, when you went to the bathroom, you just sat there. Like, that was it. You sat there and counted tiles on the floor. And you're like, this bathroom has 21 tiles. You became a tile expert in the 80s and 90s, right? And here's the thing. Back then, we didn't, I don't know about that. Back then, we didn't think we were missing out on anything. We weren't like, I wonder what's going on in the world right now. We weren't sitting on the toilet thinking, oh, let me watch this video. Like, in the 80s and 90s, like, and here's the thing. Like, and this is weird. When you think about most of the communication we do with people, like, 90% of that, you're sitting on a toilet, right? I mean, you're texting somebody, you're watching something, it's like, oh, they gave me a thumbs up, where are they? Just don't think of. But in the 80s and 90s, man, we missed out on so much, but how many of you know we weren't missing out on anything? Like, we didn't even know. We weren't as connected as we are now. And the cell phone came out. Like in the 80s, when the cell phone came out, not many people had it because it was so big, right? And it was so expensive. So not many people had a cell phone in the 80s. Again, people had pagers and beepers. But as time went on, the cell phone got smaller and more affordable. And I remember when I got my first cell phone, it was a Nokia cell phone. It had an antenna, and so I'd pull that up and talk to people. And I used it for emergencies, right? Because that's what a cell phone was for. It's for emergencies. If I'm stranded on the side of the road, at least I have a way to connect with somebody, right? So that was my first cell phone. It was this Nokia. And then as time went on, cell phones got slimmer and cooler. And I remember when I got my first Motorola Razr, right? Like, this was a flip phone. It was this small, slim, sleek thing, and I thought it was so cool. Like, I even had a pocket holster, or like a hip holster for it. Like, I put it in this case, and there would be times, like, I could carry it on my hip, hands-free. And there would be times where, like, I would unholster my phone, flip it up, and pretend to talk on it just so I could look cool, right? I mean, this is how it was. And then as time went on, the iPhone came out. And this is a game changer, right? When the smartphone came out, oh, by the way, before we get to that, at that time, like with the Motorola Razr and stuff, like texting started to become a thing, and then phones came out with keyboards. Like, I remember my sister-in-law, she had a chocolate, right? That's what it was called. And it had the screen, and you slide the screen up, and there's a keyboard hidden underneath there, so you could text. And this is like BlackBerries and stuff like that came out. And then But I had my Motorola Razr, which only had a few buttons, and so I had to use T9 technology to text people. Is that anybody else? Like, texting was so laborious. Like, text messages would be so short, right? They weren't these long novels that people text now. But then came the iPhone. And this is a game changer, because the phone became more than a phone, right? The phone wasn't just a phone anymore. Like, the phone was this portal to the world now. Like, my whole life could be run through this thing that I keep in my pocket. This shifted culture. This changed our relationships. This altered everything with how we interact with one another. And listen, this is a great and amazing invention, right? This is a great piece of technology. This is an awesome innovation. But when this came out, so many of our relationships shifted from being focused on people to be focused on a screen. We have this thing now that we talk about in society. We talk about screen time and limiting screen time. There are kids who are growing up now who will never know the joy of standing in line and just standing there because they're fixed on a screen, because they have a relationship with an iPad. They have a relationship with this thing in their pocket. And listen, the phone is great. It's amazing. And I can do a ton of things with this thing. And I just want to share with you some of the things that this has done. I mean, again, this is a portal to the world. It's opened up so many possibilities for us. I mean, with this phone, I can talk to somebody on the other side of the world. That's just the tip of the iceberg, though. See, with this thing that I keep in my pocket, I can send you an encouraging text message that'll brighten your day. Or I can send you a scathing text message that'll ruin your day. Or I can ignore your text message altogether, which is a whole new level of communication, right? With this thing that I keep in my pocket, I can instantly share a picture to a crowd of people. And that crowd of people can press their thumb on a heart icon and let me know that they approve of my picture. And when someone presses that heart icon with their thumb, for some reason it does something in my heart. All of a sudden, I feel validation. I feel important. I feel like someone sees me and likes me. But if I don't get enough people pressing the heart icon with their thumbs, that does something in my heart as well. I begin to wonder what's wrong. How come people don't see me? How come people don't like me? What? See, the phone is more than a phone. This device, it isn't just a piece of technology, but it's something that shapes who we are and how we live. It's something that determines how we see ourselves and what we think about people. With this thing that I keep in my pocket, I can find out the recipe for the chicken tikka masala that I want to cook tonight, right? I mean, I'll find it after I scroll through paragraphs and paragraphs of the author's story about how they love chicken tikka masala and how they went to India one day and how they love all the ingredients. Listen, I don't need all that. Just give me the ingredients and tell me how to make it. Come on. With this thing in my pocket, I can learn all kinds of things. With this thing in my pocket, I can express my emotions to friends and acquaintances and strangers by sending them a thumbs up or a heart or a laughing face or a crying face or a wow face or an angry face. I don't like what you posted, right? Like, I can do that. That's all it is. I can just scroll through, don't like it, love it. Wow. I can do that. With this thing in my pocket, I can let the whole world know what's going on in my life without saying a word. And I can get mad at people because they don't know what's going on in my life, even though I never told them. But I posted it. You should know. What do you mean you don't know? I posted it to my wall. It's there. Do you see how this thing in our pocket changes our relationships? It affects everything we do in our life. With this thing in my pocket, I can get into time-wasting debates on politics and the state of the world. I can jump to conclusions and I can bash people with this thing that I keep in my pocket. I can satisfy my need for power with this thing in my pocket. I can see the weather, the stock market analysis, my fantasy football league standings, and the status of my Uber ride, all with this thing that I keep in my pocket. I can set reminders, I can stay organized, I can track my macros, order toilet paper, get directions, set the temperature in my house, get Chick-fil-A points for free food, track my runtime and distance, and post it to the world for instant approval or judgment because I didn't run fast enough. All with this thing in my pocket. You can meet people with the swipe of your thumb. You can meet your next friend, your next hookup, your next boyfriend, your next girlfriend, your next husband, your next wife. You can make dinner reservations for a date. You can send money to someone. You can play Fortnite. You can learn how to change a tire. You can watch porn. You can read a devotional from the Bible. You can listen to the latest Taylor Swift album, all with a thing in your pocket. Like, this is a portal to the world. Why do I need anything else? And because this thing is so great and so amazing, I've developed this relationship with it where, yeah, I have a phone, but oftentimes my phone has me. And listen, this is a tool that we can use to give life and bring life. But like with alcohol, like guns, like tools, like bricks, like anything and everything in our life, we can use them in a way that bring destruction. See, this thing is not bad. Those tools, those things that I mentioned aren't necessarily bad, but it's how we interact with them, it's how we use them that can either bring life or bring death. That can either give us life or drain life from us. And I don't know about you, but I've been living my life in such a way where the thing in my pocket has me more than I have it. Like, I should be able to control this thing, but this thing often controls me. And listen, this isn't anything new, right? Like Paul, this early Christian, this early church planner, wrote to this church in Corinth, and he was trying to explain to them that they've been set free for a purpose. And there was this popular saying at the time where people would go around saying, I can do anything I want. Like, this is what people were quoting, I can do anything I want. And Paul gives a little more expansion on that phrase. He says this to these people at the church in Corinth. He says, you say, I'm allowed to do anything. Hey, but can we just agree that not everything is good for you? Well, nothing's wrong with it. Yeah, I know, but not everything's good for you. Even though I'm allowed to do anything, that's what you keep saying. I must not become a slave to anything. As I think about the relationship that I have with the thing in my pocket, I've discovered that there are times I've become a slave to my phone. I wonder if you would be as bold to say that with me as well. Do you resonate with this truth that sometimes this great piece of technology that you have has you and controls you? I love this project by Eric Pickersgill. He's a photographer, and he did this project called Removed. And he said the inspiration for the project came from this time that he was in Troy, New York. He was in this cafe, and he saw this family there. It was a husband and wife and two daughters. And he said, seated at the table in this cafe, he saw that the dad was on his phone and the two daughters were on their phones, and the mom just sat there phoneless, either because she didn't have a phone or she chose not to be on the phone. But he said she sat there phoneless, staring out of a window, all alone. She was surrounded by the people who were closest to her, and yet they were so disconnected. He said it was such a heartbreaking image that it inspired him to do this series called Removed. So what he did was he took pictures of people on their phones, and then he later went out and removed the phones so that you could see these images. Check this out. So here's this couple out on a nice day on a boat. And that's what we all dream of. This image here. Can't wait for that. Here's another one. How many of you, this is your house? Here's the next one. Yeah. Yeah, I love you, honey. Here's the next one. Oh, this is it. This is the dream of retirement. Yeah. Here's the next one. Next one. Yeah. How many of us would say these phones that we have, the technology that we have, has us? Paul says, sure, fine, but I don't want anything to have mastery over me. I don't want to be a slave to anything. And listen, this isn't just them on the screen. This is us. This is us. Hold on one second. This is us. Right? So, how do we move from Instamacy, having this relationship with this thing in our pocket, to having a relationship with actual people? Well, first we need to identify the problem. So watch this. The average person spends 3 hours and 15 minutes a day looking at their phone. The average person spends 3 hours and 15 minutes a day looking at their phone. You can take out your phone and take a picture of this if you want to take notes. The average person spends 3 hours and 15 minutes a day looking at their phone. I wanted to see how much time I spent a day looking at my phone, so I looked at the screen time on my phone. And you can do this too. If you have an iPhone, you just go to settings and you tap screen time. If you have another phone, I don't know how you do it, but I'm sure you can figure it out. But I went and I looked to see how much screen time I was spending on my phone, and here's what it was last week. 1 hour and 51 minutes a day looking at my phone. It's almost 2 hours. I actually got an update today just before the worship experience, and it said my percentage went up by 9%. I spent this past week, for real, 2 hours and 1 minute looking at my phone. And I knew I was preaching about this, and I was like being intentional about not looking at my phone. And it still went up, right? But I spent almost 2 hours looking at my phone every day. And I felt good about myself because I thought, you know what? The average person spends 3 hours and 15 minutes looking at their phone. I'm under that. And until I did the math, and I found out that I spent 30 days of my life, an entire month last year, looking at this. I spent 30 days nonstop. I mean, when you add it all up, I spent 30 days of my life looking at this 2.5 by 4 inch screen. Like, there's this massive world. There's all these things going on. But for an entire month of my life, this was my world. That was it. Right here. And here's what I want you to see. It's hard to see with the lights and everything, but it tells me what I most used last week. So for the entire week, I spent 4 hours on Facebook. What's going on with other people? Let me tell other people what's going on with me. And you can't see it, but so there's Facebook, there's messages, and then there's Bible. So at least Bible's in the top 3, right? And you can't see it, but it's 28 minutes. all of last week. Now, and I want to be tempted to say, but I also have a paper Bible that I read. No, it was 28 minutes in the Bible app last week. Listen, I don't say this to give you a guilt. It's reality check. So, how do we move past Instamacy to have real intimacy? And so we identify the problem. The average person spends 3 hours and 15 minutes looking at their phone every single day. But here's something that I hear often. I hear this phrase, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. Like, I wish there was more time in the day. I don't have enough time. Hey, are you going to start working out? I would, but I don't have enough time. Hey, do you want to be a better husband? Yeah, I would love to be a better husband and devote more time to my wife, but I just don't have enough time. I want to be a better parent, but I don't have enough time. I want to be better at life, but I just don't have enough time. If I had more time, then I'd be able to do it. Do you see the disconnect here? The average person spends 3 hours and 15 minutes of their day looking at their phone, but we don't have enough time. What if we took just 2 hours of that and looked at the person we were married to and had a real conversation with them? Do you think your marriage would get better? Yeah. You bet it would. What if we took just 2 hours of that and spent time like actually engaging with our kids? You think we'd be better parents? Yeah. What if we took just an hour and a half of that and went to the gym? What if, see, the disconnect is we often say, I don't have enough time, but we're spending so much time looking at this thing in our pocket. I want to have better friendships. What if we refused to have friendships through this, and we actually met up and talked to people and connected with people, how much better would our friendships be? Because here's the deal. When I'm going through something in my life, I don't need somebody to send me a crying face. I need somebody to sit with me. Right? When I have something I'm celebrating, I don't need somebody to send me a fireworks gift. I need someone to have a drink with me. And come on, let's celebrate. In moderation, of course. Right? So look, what if? Hey, how do we get past Instamacy? We say, thank you, you're an awesome tool, but I'm going to set you aside, and I'm going to interact with real people. So I want to give you, I said I was going to talk about this ancient book that was written 3,500 years ago and make the connection. So here, let's do this. So we've talked about modern technology. This ancient book was written 3,500 years ago. And in the book of Genesis, it's the first book of the Bible. In the book of Genesis, there's this great technological advancement that happens. I want to show it to you. Genesis 11:3. What happens is people are building stuff, and they come across this technological advancement. They're building this tower, and here's what it says, Genesis 11:3. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. And then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be scattered over the face of the whole earth." So right here in Genesis, humanity comes up with this great invention. They're using bricks now instead of stones for building. And bricks are great because bricks are cheaper to use. Bricks are more cost efficient. Bricks are more efficient to use. Bricks provide uniformity in building. And so there's this great technological advancement. But I want you to see how they use this advancement to make a name for themselves. We have this great innovation. I know. Let's use it to make a name for ourselves. Let's use it to prop ourselves up so that people will see us and see how awesome we are. Again, this is like back in Genesis, right? That people would use innovation to try and prop themselves up, make a name for themselves, and let others see how awesome they are. Try and imagine what that would be like. But this is what we do, right? And so there's this new innovation with bricks, and they use it to make a name for themselves. And then as time goes on, we get to the book of Exodus. And the book of Exodus is a book about identity. It's a book about liberation. It's a book about setting people free, about God setting his people free. See, what happens in the book of Exodus is the people of Israel, the people of God, are enslaved in Egypt. And when they're enslaved in Egypt, here's what the Egyptians do to them. Exodus 1:14. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and make bricks and do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless in all their demands. When the people of God were slaves in Egypt, they were forced to make bricks. Their worth, their identity, their value was surrounded around bricks. Bricks, bricks, bricks. The more bricks you make, the better you are. Because if I own you and you don't make enough bricks, why would I feed you? Why would I care about you? Why would I house you? You're actually a waste of time. You're a waste of space. You're of no value to me. And so for the slaves in Egypt, their identity was in bricks. It was about what I do, what I can accomplish, how much can I make. And then God sets them free through the Exodus. And then he delivers them, and then he gives them this set of commands, the 10 Commandments. And one of the commands that he gives them, it's the longest command in the 10 Commandments. It's the fourth one. God says, here's what I want you to do. Take a break. Once a week, I want you to just take a break. I want you to observe a Sabbath. And God doesn't say this because he's like, hey, you guys are overworked, you need to take a break. No, God says this because he's trying to teach them something about their identity. See, for years in Egypt, your identity, your value, and worth was in bricks. Bricks, bricks. How many bricks can I produce? I am a brick maker. Their value was in being a human doing. God is trying to teach them through the Sabbath to take a break and to say your worth and your value is not in what you do and how connected you are. And your worth and your value is in who I say you are. You're not a human doing, you're a human being. So take a break. set it down. Disconnect. Like God is trying to set the people of Israel free. I wonder how many of us have been enslaved to a brand new brick. Our identity, our worth, our validation is found right in here. See, my phone has Bluetooth, and my car stereo system has Bluetooth too. So it's really great. I can actually connect my phone to my car, and I love it. It's so easy to listen to music because I don't have to have it like connected to anything literally. But when I connect my phone to my car through Bluetooth, that's called tethering, right? And so you can tether your phone to different devices so that it can communicate with them and talk with them. And so it's like tied to those things. And I wonder though, how many of us have gotten to a point in our life where our phones aren't just tethered to devices in our life, but it's almost like our phone is tethered to our soul, right? Our phone is just tethered to our identity and who we are. And I wonder if it's time to have a cellular exodus. And listen, I'm not saying social media is bad. I love Facebook. I have it. I have Instagram. I love it. I think it's great. I'm just saying these things that we have shouldn't have us. And if our relationship with the thing in our pocket, we got to understand that our relationship with the thing in our pocket affects our relationship with other people. And it's time to set it down, to take an exodus, and to be free from that. So I want to give you some quick ways to know if your phone has you. Here's just quick ones. When you lose it, do you lose it? Do you mean like do you freak out? Like do you like when you lose your phone? Is it like everything has to stop and I have to find this? Like what? Because if you lose a sweatshirt, you're like, oh, I'll find it. But if you lose this, do you lose it? Right? Here's one. Do you find yourself impulsively and instinctively checking your phone? Like you don't even need to, but you just keep checking it? According to the New York Post, the average person looks at their phone every 12 minutes, 80 times a day. How about this? Watch this. When you stop at a stoplight, what are you looking at? Do this. When you stop at a stoplight, next time you stop at a stoplight, look up from your phone and look at everyone else who's on their phone around you. Right? How do we know if our phone has us? Here's an indicator. Do you ever say, I'm always on my phone? Do people say about someone else, oh, they're always on their phone? Do your kids say about you, you're always on your phone? Have people been talking to you and they have to repeat themselves because you're engrossed in a conversation happening elsewhere? Right? Have you seen this where couples are out on a date or whatever it is, and they're both on their phone? Or maybe it's a family and they're clearly on vacation, but they're all on their phone. Or you go to a concert and you look and all you see in the crowd is a sea of phones. We have a problem. It's time for a cellular exodus. As we wrap up, I want to give you some quick ways, some practical ways to take this exodus. They're going to be on the screen. You can take a picture of this. But I want to encourage you to do this. Set some disconnect times in your life. Set some disconnect times in your life. Between this time and this time, I won't have my phone near me. And a practical way to do that is when you get home, put your phone in a room in the house and let it be there. Right? Don't carry it on you when you're at home. Check your phone at set times, not random times. Set aside a day of the week where you're just busy being. What are you doing? Oh, I'm just being. Just do that. Instead of look at your phone, look at the people around you. Take a book with you. And when you're tempted to look at your phone, just pull out that book. You'll find out that you'll do a lot more reading than you ever thought you could. Right? See, the thing with a cell phone is it's always on, and we always have it, which means we're always on. It's time for a break. It's time for an exodus. It's time to let go and just breathe and be. Because what those people out there, whether I know them or not, what they say about me, what they like about my picture, about my post, about my status, that has nothing to do with who I am. There's a whole world around me. And I don't want to miss it because I'm looking at this. Jesus wants to set you free from your sin, your addiction, your habits, yourself. But he also wants to set you free from the thing that you have a relationship with in your pocket. So it's time to go on an exodus. I wonder if you've ever made a decision to say yes to Jesus. You know, so many of us, we live our lives trying to do life on our own and get free on our own and figure stuff out on our own. But Jesus comes along and he says, hey, I know the way to freedom. I know the way to life, and I want to give that to you. And when we follow Jesus, we find the life we've always longed for. And I wonder if you've ever come to a point in your life where you've said, Jesus, I believe that you died for me on the cross. Not just to forgive me of my sin, but to set me free in every area of my life, including this addiction that I have with this thing in my pocket. I wonder if you believe that Jesus died for you on the cross and that he rose again from the dead. And because of that, you're willing to say, Jesus, I want to live for you. Like, I want to follow you. I want to give you my life and go your way instead of my way. And I wonder if you're ready to make that decision to be baptized into him, to be immersed into him, to begin that relationship with him. If you've never made the decision to believe in Jesus, follow him, and be immersed into him, today's the day to say yes to him and be set free, not just from an addiction to your phone, but to be set free from everything in your life. When you came in, there were cards on your chairs. There's a Connect card on that. And at the bottom of that, there's a box that says, I want to know more about baptism. If you're ready to make a decision to follow Jesus, would you mark that box, drop it off at the black tables? We'd love to talk to you about you starting a relationship with Jesus. And for the rest of us, can I just remind you that Christ has set you free so you could be free? And if we're going to be free and we're going to have real friendships and real relationships, the first thing we got to do is cut the tie to the thing in our pocket. So what we're going to do is we're going to observe communion in a moment. People are going to come down. They're going to pass out trays, and in those trays are stacks of cups. The bottom cup has a piece of bread that's there to remind us of Jesus' body that was broken for us. The top cup has some juice that's there to remind us of his blood that was shed for us. I want to invite you as this passes, feel free to take communion any time that you'd like. But let this be a time where you really think through, okay, what am I going to do to take the next steps to get free from this thing in my pocket so that I can experience life to the full? Would you pray with me? God, thank you so much that you came to set us free. So many of us, we just gradually walked into this state of slavery where this thing in our pocket has become our master. We don't want to worship our phone anymore. We don't want to worship the devices in our life anymore. We want to be free. We want to know you better. We want to know you more intimately. And so many of us, we want real relationships, real friendships that are going to last and mean something. So God, as we go through this series, set us free. Help us have healthy friendships, healthy relationships. We can't wait as we go on this journey together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks so much for listening. We pray God inspires, challenges, and motivates you to become greater through what you've just heard. Again, be sure to check us out at wearetherising.com. Remember, your best days are still ahead.